Maybe you've heard the phrase Project 2025, and maybe some folks think that sounds a lot like a think tank thing. But not a real thing. Well, I've got some bad news for you, because parts of that plan are already being put into practice, and they're not aimed at some abstract bureaucracy. They're aimed at your job protections, your schools, your medical care, and who gets to stay in this country. Project 2025 is a 900-page political playbook, not a law, but a step-by-step guide written by conservative groups on how to reshape the federal government from the inside out, if they control the White House. And in 2025, parts of that guide started becoming reality. Quick side note before we get too deep into this, if you want to talk about topics like this with other people, I'm holding a couple of small Zoom conversations in December. You can find the details through the link in my profile. Okay, back to the video and Project 2025. First, the DEI crackdown. Right after inauguration, the president signed executive orders telling federal agencies and contractors to dismantle most diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The Justice Department followed up, reframing some DEI policies as potential discrimination. There are now public complaint portals for people to report schools, employers, or institutions over DEI practices, including things like race-based scholarships or diversity offices. And that's not a rumor, that's what's already happening. And it matches exactly what Project 2025 calls for, using civil rights law to go after DEI itself, even in private institutions that rely on federal funding. Second, the civil service purge. The admin brought back a system called Schedule F that lets political appointees reclassify career policy roles so they can be fired more easily. Tens of thousands of jobs could lose protections. We're talking policy analysts, economists, legal advisors, people who've served across admins, and they're now suddenly vulnerable to political loyalty tests. That's not some hidden agenda. Project 2025 says the permanent federal workforce is part of the problem. It needs to be replaced with ideologically aligned personnel. Third, immigration enforcement. There's already a border emergency in place. The National Guard and military units are supporting DHS. We've seen large-scale raids and immigration processing slowed or frozen for people from over a dozen countries, including some who worked alongside the U.S. overseas. That's not all of it either, because Project 2025 pushes for the use of military assistance, like emergency declarations and faster deportation timelines, to make mass removals easier and harder to change. Sorry, got a little tickle in my throat. Make removals easier and harder to challenge. And then there's what's still coming. One major plan on the table is using a 19th century law, the Comstock Act of 1873, to block abortion pills from being mailed anywhere in the country, even in states where abortion is legal. Conservative legal teams are already testing that theory in court. If it moves forward, the federal government could override state laws by classifying abortion medication as non-mailable. And that's a nationwide ban, without Congress ever voting on it. So why does any of this matter? Because it's not just about policy. It's about power. Who holds it, who's protected, and who's punished. If you're a teacher, or a student, or a doctor, or a civil servant, if you work at a nonprofit or get federal aid, these changes could touch your life, or someone close to you at the very least. Here's what to watch for. Next, rules that give the White House more direct say over who gets prosecuted. Emergencies being used like regular governance. Funding threats to schools, hospitals, and cities unless they change what they teach or who they serve. Because once that becomes normal, it's a lot harder to undo. Should we bear witness to some good news? Sure, none of this is set in stone, but it does depend on people noticing and speaking up before the next wave of these changes rolls in. So when you hear Project 2025, what worries you most? And what are you willing to do about it?